Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. In the vein of trying to do some single subject videos, sort of, today's video is going to be based around the beef trim that I buy from Costco. So what I'm doing is a big batch of Bolognese, and with that Bolognese I'm going to make some keto pasta sheets to use for lasagna, as well as probably some lasagna sheets for the kids too, and then a white sauce and all that sort of thing. So we're going to start off the day with getting the Bolognese done first. I have to mince all the beef and everything too, but first I'm going to get the veggies sorted. Alright, so I use my Thermomix for processing all my veggies and stuff because I like it to be nice and fine in my dish, and I like to have a wide variety of veggies. I also have frozen zucchini, so it's just shredded zucchini that's been frozen that I'm going to use in this, that I pulled out of the freezer. And I also have some diced bacon, so I'm going to do it predominantly beef, but I use diced bacon as well. I probably won't use any pork mince this run because I haven't pulled the pork roast out I've got one pork roast left that I'll do something with, but I won't pull it out just to add to the Bolognese kind of thing. So I'm going to start off with a couple of big onions. Now we're low on onions, so I've only got a couple of them here. I'd probably use twice this amount normally, so I'll probably add some dried onion as well. And all I do is I cut them into quarters, and we're going to toss them into the Thermomix. Oops, let me adjust my camera a little bit there so that you can see what I'm doing. And we're going to mince these up, which is heaps easier than trying to cut them up nice and small. Less time, but also a lot less work on my hands and wrists, which really just don't like knife work. They don't like, my left hand doesn't like gripping what I'm cutting, and my right hand doesn't like gripping the knife itself. And so yeah, so we're just going to cut them into quarters. We're going to do speed 5 for about 10 seconds. So we got that all minced nice and fine. Now I'm going to grab a pot to start this in. Alright, then we've got a little bit of celery. This is all I've got in the fridge at the moment, so I'm going to throw some celery in as well. And I don't know, half a dozen carrots, and I just cut these up into chunks. I don't peel them or anything. I just take the ends off them, stick them in there as well, and we're going to do the same thing, speed 5 for 5 to 10 seconds. And we've got minced carrot and celery in there, so that's going to go in the pot as well. Alright, now we've got the zucchini. I'm just going to put it in frozen. I'm not overly concerned. It will defrost. And then, so this is probably about 1.2 kilos of zucchini in those 2 bags. And then I don't normally use a whole kilo of bacon. I normally use about half a kilo just because it's an expensive ingredient. And normally I mince it up a little bit finer. Like this is diced. Oh, I made a mess. That's a good one. This is already diced, but I normally mince it up a little bit further into more of a mince to get that flavour through, but without the bits of bacon texture factor, because I'm not going to spend time cooking it on its own. It's going to be cooked with the vegetables. So let's just do around about half this bag, and the other half I will cook for something else. So we'll just toss that in there, and we will put this other half away for something else. And I'm just going to break that up as well. Again, speed 5. I don't have any fresh garlic at the moment, so I'm going to use a jar, so I'll grab that as well. Alright, so that's all minced up in there as well, so I'm going to add that. Let me get the garlic. Alright, and we're just going to keep adding everything in. So we've got the bacon mix as well now. I'm just going to scrape out. We use all sorts of things in here. If I had sweet potato, I would use some grated sweet potato. Any sort of veggie that we just need to use up works well in this base. So all that bacon in there as well, with that onion, the carrot, the zucchini, the celery. I'm going to add a good glug of garlic. As I said, I don't have any fresh garlic at the moment, so I'm just going to add a really good glug of minced garlic, and then I'm going to turn this on and get this sweating while I start working on the beef to go in it. So I need to find a lighter. We'll get this started while we move on to the next step. So this will take ages to sweat down. Like, that zucchini's got to defrost, and then all that water in the bottom's got to cook off till we get some color and browning on some of these veggies. So this is a good sort of a 20-30 minutes worth of cooking down this little, what do they call it, a mirepoix mix, basically. So I'll just stir this as I go, get that zucchini to defrost and that sort of thing while I prep everything else. All right, and the next step is to get the beef ready for the mincer. So we've got these big pieces of beef from the beef trim packs. They are normally just big muscle pieces, so lots of connective tissue and things like that, perfect for making mince with. They've got a good variety of, a good ratio of fat to meat and muscle and stuff, so it's really tasty so long as we grind it small enough. So the point is just to cut it into chunks that are the right size for the mincer. Now, I do have a second bag of this, and I may mince it all up today since I'm going to have the mincer out. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this section up. I'm going to put it in a bowl, and I'm going to put it in the fridge, and then I'll work on the next section, put that in the fridge, bring the stuff that's been in the fridge out to mince, because the colder your meat is, the better for mincing. In my last video that I was talking about, like, you can put the whole mincer part in the freezer to keep everything cold. Someone mentioned that you can put ice cubes through the mincer to chill everything if it starts getting warm, which is a really great thing, except that we don't generally freeze standard size ice cubes. We tend to freeze those really giant cubes, which wouldn't work. So I need to get some of the smaller ice cube trays out so that I can do that. So I'm going to go and sharpen my knife, and then I'm going to come back. All right, the goal is to cut it into pieces that are small enough to feed through the mincer without too much effort, but also stay nice and cool, because the bigger the pieces, the harder the mincer has to work, which then warms up the mechanism. So all I'm doing is cutting them into little cubes. Now, sometimes when I cut this trim up, I would keep all these lean bits aside and I would use them for like a beef pie filling or something, but I am not going to this particular time. I don't know if I'd get to making it, so it's probably better off that I have it all in mince form for this particular batch, and then I can choose what we do with mince for it. I bought the taco shells for the kids this month, so they could have beef tacos. I could do, I don't know what yet. I don't really have plans for it, but I am doing a big batch of bolognese, which will take a fair bit of this mince up anyway, because I like to freeze it because it's a super simple, well-rounded, lots of veggies, proteins, carbs and everything meal that the kids can heat up if I haven't been cooking for the day or whatever. It's super easy to just heat up with pasta, and even if I haven't defrosted it, it takes minimal time to defrost it to use. So I will do a big batch of bolognese full of the veggies and stuff as well, and then I will decide what I'm going to do with the rest of it. So I'm just going to go through, cut all this up and get it all sorted, and then I will pull the mincer out and I'll bring you back then. Alright, so I've cut up all the beef. It's been sitting in the fridge for a bit. Now I'm getting ready to mince it. So I always comment about my Louvel mincer. Whenever anyone asks for a mincer to buy, this is one I suggest. Now, it uses low wattage for the power that it has, which is fantastic. When I bought it, I think it's rated at 1800 watts. And when I bought it, I wasn't real sure how it would go, but I put a meter on it and it doesn't pull the 1800 most of the time. And my system handles it fine. It doesn't have any problems with it whatsoever. The other thing is the ease of putting it together and stuff. Now, obviously mine's stored on an open shelf, so it's not as pristine as it could be, but it's perfectly serviceable, and all these pieces get stored. So to put these together, one of the other things that's super simple about, you've got your chute, you've got your screw, and once that's in, lock it into place. Then you've got your 4-fin blade. They also sell a 2-fin blade for whatever purposes you need. Your mincing plate, they have 3 or 5 different size mincing plates. I'm using a fairly fine one here because the beef is pretty muscly, a lot of connective tissue and stuff, so it's not real good for doing too big, so we're using the fine one. If you wanted to make it even easier on the mincer, you could use a bigger one and run it through on the smaller one, which is actually what they do at Costco. When they use this mince, they actually run it through on a bigger grinding plate, and then a smaller one. But I find that in the quantities that I'm doing, it's really not that big a deal. Keep it nice and cool, run it through, it's fine. They probably stick much larger pieces through their mincers. They're probably a lot bigger mincers. And then we've got our plate and our plunger. So super, super simple. It has a reverse, it has a speed 1 and a speed 2. We tend to use the speed 2 a fair bit more in summer when the meat's warmer, just to help it, push through a little bit more. In winter, I rarely ever need to go up over speed 1, and it has sausage attachments as well that work with this too. So you can use the flat blade and the tubes to do your sausages through this as well, which I've shown on previous videos. So this is the Louvel, I believe it's the Eclipse. I've got an affiliate link in the description if you're interested in a mincer, and I highly recommend it. About 1 kilo a minute it tends to go through. So let me go get that beef. All right, so I got about the first 2.5 kilos of mince that we'll put through, and we'll stick this straight into the pot with all the veggies and stuff. All right, so I'm going to put this 2.5 kilos straight in the pot, and then we'll probably do about the same amount, do about 5 kilos all up into the bolognese and see where that sits at quantity, and then decide what I'm doing with the rest. If I don't get it all minced today, then I can mince it tomorrow. So we'll just see how the mincer goes with the temperatures and stuff like that. So we've ended up with about 8 kilos of mince, so I'm just going to do that as the batch of bolognese, because I'm going to use this bolognese for a few different things, so that should be fine. And then we might leave it, the machine's very warm, so we might look at doing the other lot tomorrow first thing in the morning when it's nice and cool, or later in the afternoon or something, and leave it at that for the moment. It's always better to be doing these mincing projects in winter, but of course you don't always have that opportunity because I have to be able to afford to buy the mince. So we're going to put the full 8 kilos in here. Now normally I would put, let me move you over. Now normally I would put some sort of a lentil or a barley or something in this along with the mince, but Darryl and I are doing the whole low carb thing, and all of those things would add...
What are you guys doing? What are you guys doing?
All those things... all of those things would add carbs or whatever. So I'm going to stick with just the mince, which is probably why I've done a little bit higher ratio of mince there for this particular one. But that's fine. It's just, we'll see how we go with adding the liquids and see where it, ends up being. So we'll get that. All right, so most of this mince is browned. I've collected all the other ingredients to go in it, so we should be good. Now, bolognese beef mince is not something that I like the texture of canned. But what I do is I make this bolognese really thick, and then I freeze it in 2 kilo lots. And what the kids do when they're reheating it is they use a jar of my home canned pasta sauce. Now the home canned pasta sauce is just a tomato based pasta sauce with lots of veggies and stuff in it that I pressure can. I actually don't have any left on the shelf, so I do need to make that as well. And so that way this stays really nice and thick, easy to freeze, easy to put into bags and stuff. And then when they're heating it up, they add a jar of the home canned pasta sauce as well, and then that ends up being the right quantity for them for a meal for all 6 of them, sometimes with some leftovers. So measurements in this sort of thing is not my forte, but I am going to try and keep track so I can write it down. Now I've got these 800 grams of muri tomatoes. These are a really nice thick minced up tomato that you can get at Costco. You can get multi-brand elsewhere, but the cost of them at Costco is much better. Diced tomatoes, the Aldi crushed tomatoes work fine too. They're just in smaller tins, so I'm using twice the amount of tins. These 800-gram tins, really nice tomato, are my preference. So we're going to use 4 of these. So we're looking at 3.2 litres of crushed tomatoes into this mix to start with. All right. Then we're going to add some tomato passata. So for all our Americans, I think you just call it tomato sauce. It is just nothing but tomato ingredients, tomato puree, 99.5% tomatoes with a bit of salt. We call it passata, and it's just a thick tomato, smooth, seedless, skinless tomato puree. So I'm going to add a bit of water to all of these to make sure I get all of it out. But I have 4 of these as well, and these are all 700 grams. So we've got 2.8 litres of tomato passata. These are the jars that I love using for my cordial too, if you recognize them. This pretty shape, this is how I buy them to use them. So I love the product, but I also really love the jars. So all right, so 4 of those. Now I'm just going to put some water in the bottom of each of these so that I can get all the product out of them. Now sometimes I've made fresh stock when I go to make bolognese, especially if I'm going to turn it into lasagna soup. So I would put a whole bunch of stock in here. But because I haven't made any fresh at the moment, and I've got probably half a dozen jars on the shelf and that's it, I'm not going to add it in this. So this bit of water is basically going, with a bit of stock powder, is basically going to be my stock proportion of this particular batch. So I'll use some Vegeta as the stock powder. So we're just getting all the excess out of these. All right, the next thing I add is tomato paste. Not everyone likes tomato paste in their bolognese. I buy this Italian tomato paste from Coles. I prefer it as a flavour than most of the stuff, the Chinese branded stuff. It seems to be richer, more depth, but it's still a really good price at Coles, the Italian tomato paste at Coles. Can't remember how much these jars are, but they're still within a scope of the price of the Chinese origin ones, to make it worthwhile for the flavour, but not to be, spending 10 times the price. Need a spatula for that one. So I'm going to put this whole 500 gram jar in there. I actually have another jar there just in case I want it. Now, as I said, some people don't like tomato paste in their bolognese. They don't like the flavour of it. I find this particular tomato paste to be really good, but it is a condensed tomato product. So there is still that there as to, your preferences, but it helps to thicken it up. And it just gives it a rich flavour, so I really like it in my bolognese. I am going to add some of the dried onion flakes as well, because I only had those 2 onions right at the beginning of in the veggies. And so I'm going to add some generous amount of dried onion flakes in there as well. And we're going to give this a mix up and have a look at it first. Get the sauce down underneath the meat. Have a look at the consistency and the quantity in the pot. Let this simmer for 10 or 15 minutes, and then I'll come back to add some seasonings and see whether I want to add any more liquid to this. Some water with the stock powder, or I can always add more tomato products or whatever. But for the moment, this is looking like a pretty good ratio. So I'm going to leave that alone for 10 to 15 minutes, let those onion flakes soften up, flavour sort of emulsify a little bit, and then I'll come back and add some seasonings. All right, so consistency is looking good. So now we add some of our flavourings. Now everyone has different flavour profiles for their bolognese. I don't use red wine, but I do use balsamic vinegar. So this is just Kirkland's balsamic vinegar, and I put a good, probably, I want to say it's 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of balsamic in here. It adds some lovely flavour and richness in that. So we've got about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of balsamic in there as a starting point. I also like to add paprika to my bolognese. Again, anyone who's been around for a while knows that I add paprika to just about everything. And I'm generous with that. We'll say probably 1/4 of a cup again of paprika in there. And you get that mixed in. Something else I add is a little bit of soy sauce. Again, it's giving it some salt, but it's also just giving it more umami, more depth of flavour. And I want to say again, probably 1/4 of a cup in there. Alright, so adding that now. Other thing I add is normally some Italian herbs. I happen to have some mixed up. It's just a blend of, you know, all your standard Italian herbs. I have a recipe somewhere. I blend it up when I get around to it and then add it to things. I'm just going to tip the rest of that in there. That was probably sort of 2 tablespoons of Italian herbs in there. I'm going to get some vegeta as well. Again, we're bumping the umami and flavors, and then I will get Darryl to taste it to see if it needs more salt or anything else. So let me grab the vegeta. Again, we're going to go 2-3 teaspoons worth. Run that through. Like that. And then Darryl's going to give it a taste. I'm going to add that other jar of tomato paste that I said I might add, because it needs a bit more of that. The flavour will improve too the longer it simmers, so normally it's a little bit of a lighter flavour now, and it gets a bit deeper the longer it simmers. So we let this go for a couple of hours on the stove on low. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do to go with this bolognese mince is I'm going to make some keto pasta. Now, many years ago when Darryl and I were keto, we used the Diet Dr. Lasagna recipe, and they have a garlic bread which is really nice too, but I'm going to try the pasta. I remember it being nice, but we shall see. The recipe uses 10 ounces of cream cheese, which is about 280 grams. A brick that we buy is 250, so I don't want to use 30 grams of something else. So it's 8 eggs to 10 ounces of cream cheese. I've put in 8 eggs in here, but I've used 8 fairy eggs, you know, the eggs off the chickens who are only just laying, so they're a smaller size. And then I'm going to put this 250 grams in, which should work out as about the right ratio in that. So I'm just going to put the 250 in there. And then it wants a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to then blend this up, and then we're going to add some psyllium husk, and then it gets baked. So I'm going to put a little bit of salt in here, and then I'm going to blend it. Let me find a Thermomix lid. This one has veggies on it, which is probably fine. Not going to hurt anything. So I'm just going to scrape the majority of them off. Like that. What are you making? Pasta. Like that. So we've got the 8 eggs. My mic hasn't been on. There we go. So we've got the 8 eggs and then the 240 grams of cream cheese in there. Now it's just a thin liquid because the psyllium husk is what thickens it. So I'm going to grab, we want 1/3 of a cup of psyllium husk. All right, so 2/3 of a cup of psyllium husk as well. and then it's got to sit and set for a bit. So while it does that, I'm going to get the trays going. So we've got 2/3 of a cup. Oh. I'm going to mix it. And then we're just going to, I do wonder if I probably should have powdered that a little bit more. It says psyllium husk powder. This is labelled as psyllium husks. Possibly not as fine as it should be. We'll see if this sets up. I don't really want to waste the ingredients if it doesn't though, so we will see what it does. So I'm just going to let that sit for a little bit. I'm going to grab the baking trays that I use because this now has to be baked before it can be used as pasta. Alright, so it's sat for 10 minutes and it's definitely more of a dough now rather than liquid. So on the recipe it states that you can spread it between 1 or 2 trays. So let's start by putting half-ish. Was I supposed to grease these? No, it just said baking paper, so it's been a long time since I made this last. I reckon it'll all go on one of these sheets, and we'll spread it out as thin as we can, but through just one. So I might use the baking paper from the other one on top. It says that you can do that, and just spread this out. Because I don't think I'm going to comfortably get it to spread between 2 trays. Realistically, I want it as thin as possible because it's a pasta sheet, and normally I roll my pasta out as thin as possible. But it's an odd texture with that whole emulsifying thickening of the psyllium husk. Like, it's not a dough, but it's like a, I don't know, like a frothy sort of a, not sure really how to explain it. This is the experimental part. The bolognese, I make bolognese all the time. That's delicious. You can make that and know that that is going to be good. But this one, we shall see. So, I think something from the tray on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to looks like you bake it with the baking paper on there, and then I might get a jar. Let's go with one of my Christmas jars, nice and uniformly round, and see if we can spread it a little bit more where there's paper to spread it, but try and stop it from, like, it's coming out the edges of everything. Oh man, I am a little bit, I think that this is partly why the diet isn't working for me, because I spent so long figuring out how to make certain things that are now really simple for me, like making fresh standard pasta, that I know some people find difficult, but for me is just something that I do without any thought. And now having to try and work on these other alternatives to a degree, I just don't want to. This is feeling too thick though. So I just pulled some from the edge there that was cascading over the edge of the baking tray, and I'm trying to just spread it to every corner as evenly as possible so that we get it as thin as space allows. That's the idea anyway. So into this corner here as well. Nice even pressure, so we're trying to get it as even as possible. But I don't know. We're going to go with it, and we're going to see. Oh, the flies are bad at the moment. We're just going to see what it does. It feels like I could have spread it between two, but when I was doing it, it didn't feel like I could. So who knows? Anyway, the recipe says to bake it with the baking paper on there, so that's good because there's no way I can get that off. 10 to 12 minutes, it says, at what temperature did it say? 350. So, no, 300. So we'll put it in the oven and I'll bring you back. All right, so that's been the 12 to 14 minutes. The top peeled off really easily, so that's a good sign. But it is so thick in some spots. It definitely needed to be spread out in more, because some of it is, yeah, really, really thick. Dunno. I don't think I can roll it out further, because part of the problem was I sort of ran out of space to roll it. But I don't think I'd be able to roll it out now. I think it's set as much as it was gonna set, sort of thing. Let's just see what it does though. It's sticky because it's melted cheese, I suppose, so maybe let's give it a little bit of room this way, and we'll just see if we can spread it out a little bit this way where it was really thick. So it's broken it up a little bit, but it's going to be a layer in a pasta, so it should be fine. Just not sure, but that's what happens with these new recipes. As I said, I think that's partly why I'm a little frustrated with the whole eating style, is because I mastered so many things and now I'm having to make things that I can't get to work, and I'm a bit tired and a bit frustrated. But anyway, it's set, it's really thick, but we will see how we go. And I think that the psyllium husks probably should have been powdered, because I don't think it's supposed to have all the flecks in it. But this, I'm still going to layer it up because it looks like, I don't know, I remember it being nice when we tried it. It's got a stretch to it because it's got the cheese in it. It's got a slight eggy texture to it, but not excessively. So I think it'll work anyway. It'll add some interest to being the lasagna. Now, I'm pretty sure that on the site you can make it like this and you can cut it into strips to use as pasta. And then you don't have to cook it any further or anything. You just use this with the hot sauce or whatever, which sounds interesting as well, but it definitely needs to be thinner. So where I've got it, it's still pretty thick even where I spread it out there. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to fiddle with it too much, because I think it's adequate for what we're looking for. We'll give it a go, and then if I decide that we liked it enough, I can work on thinning it out better. And maybe having the psyllium husks ground into a powder will make it more usable anyway. Don't know. It was an experiment. So we will let this cool. I'm going to put it back on the tray to be out of the way, though it's going to be larger than the tray now, of course. It is a little bit like the cottage cheese flatbread. That's what it reminds me of. Anyway, I'm going to put a cover over this. I'm going to let it cool, and then I need to make the cheese sauce. So even if nothing else works out, the star of the video was the Bolognese, which I knew would work out. It has reduced a little bit. It has got this lovely, shiny, glossy look to it now, and it tastes wonderful. So I did add a tiny bit more salt. I just felt it needed a little bit more salt. We've got good texture, good flavour. It's right to go now. So this has been simmering for the last couple of hours. I can turn this off, put a lid on it, and then get sorted. So it's 4 o'clock. It's nearly time to do dinner anyway. I will do a penne bake for the kids. So I'm washing a Thermomix at the moment. I need to do the cheese sauce for our lasagna, but I also will do a dairy-free cheese sauce to make them a penne pasta bake thing. So that's next on the agenda. All right, so the low carb cheese sauce for the low carb lasagna doesn't need cooking as such, so that's fine. I'll mix that up shortly, but I will do a cooked one for the kids. Now, obviously my lasagna, the low carb lasagna, isn't going to be completely low carb because it has all that tomato and the carrots and everything in the bolognese. I will look at macros out of curiosity, but we're not overly concerned. But the kids one, I'm just going to do one of my standard white sauces with the egg yolks for the richness. It's a bit like a Pastitsio sauce. That's sort of what we're aiming for here. So I've washed the Thermomix bowl. I'm going to use Nuttallix because I'd normally use ghee, but the last jar of ghee got smashed, and I did order some online. I think it's at the post office at the moment, actually. So I'm going to just use Nuttallix for theirs for today. And we're going to do about 100 grams of butter, or Nuttallix, whatever. 100 grams of fat. We're going to do some plain flour, about 100 grams of that as well. Lamington's yelling because Surreal came out and it's almost dinner time for the animals, and Surreal's the one who feeds them. So so we can do about 100 grams of flour. We're going to do around about a litre of milk. So I've got coconut cream here. There's probably a litre in here if I water it down. So I'm going to water it down a bit so that it's more milk than cream and easier to pour. And we're going to do about a litre in here. There you go. So we've got a litre of milk. I'm going to do a little bit of salt and a little bit of paprika, optional, just half a teaspoon. Paprika, I like the colour it gives it, and I normally put in a little bit of garlic and onion as well. Again, sort of just a teaspoon each of those. I don't know where my onion powder has gone. Some onion flakes will do. Again, just looking at about a teaspoon of each. We're just adding a little bit of depth of flavour there. And then what I'm going to do is add some nutritional yeast. I'm looking at around about the 40 gram mark of that. And we're going to cook it. So I've just piled everything in there. I've got lid on. I'm going to go for probably 9 minutes at about 90 at speed 3. And I'm just going to let that cook up. All right, so the sound has changed. It only took about 5 minutes. The sound changed to thickening, that you know that the sauce is thick. I'm just going to have a quick look at it. So yeah, you can see that it's started to thicken up. So what I'm going to do before it gets too much thicker is I separated some eggs. So I've got some yolks and some whites, 3 egg yolks here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the heating and I'm going to turn this on to speed 3. Might go a bit faster. Might go 4 and up. No, too far. 3.5, and I'm going to pour those egg yolks in, and the heat, that's the residual heat's going to cook those for me. And there you go. That's the creamy, cheesy white sauce for the kids' pasta bake done. So now I've got pasta on the stove, and then once that's cooked, I'll put it all together. All right, so I've got 2 trays. We got about 400 grams of it's macaroni pasta, just because that's what was on top in it. And then I'm going to add the bolognese. I'm going to make a little bit of a dripping mess just because that pot's too big for me to get in the right position and film. So if I drip some, I'll just have to clean it up, and that's life. So we're doing about the 2 jugfuls, which is around about the same amount that I would freeze for a single meal for the kids. So about the 2 kilo mark type thing in each tray, because this can be 2 days worth of meals. And then we're going to mix that sauce in, and I think that's a good amount in there. So we're just going to do that, mix that through, and then we're going to pour the sauce over the top. Now, I don't think I've got any breadcrumbs at the moment. I normally have sourdough breadcrumbs in the freezer, and I just don't think I've got any at the moment. I don't think I got this particularly even either by the looks of it, but then all I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten that out and I'm going to pour the cheese sauce over the top. Now, it is only 4:30. It is early for dinner, but by getting this done now, I can just put it in the oven, go inside, serve it up. I still have to put Darryl's and mine together, so I'm still doing that. And we've got plenty of cheese sauce on both of these. And I'm just going to spread it. Of course, if you wanted it to look good, you'd use a different spreading tool so you didn't get mince red sauce all through your cheese sauce, but I don't care. So we're going to... I really should have been taking photos of all this for the website too, and I totally forgot until right then. Oh well. So there we go, cheese sauce. This is going to go in the oven for only needs 25-30 minutes. That's it, and then it'll be all good. All right, so the cheese sauce with the Diet Doctor cheese topping for the lasagna is a simple mixed together one. So it is 1.5 cups of sour cream, which will probably end up being most of this, I'd imagine, because that's 1/2 cup. And that'd be, just under another 1/2 cup. So I'd imagine the 300-gram pot is probably accurate and convenient. So we'll just go with that. All right. And then it's got 1 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. So this has been in the freezer, so always harder to measure out when it's been in the freezer. So we've got 1/2 cup, 1 cup, it's good to me. And then 1/2 cup of Parmesan. I don't have any Parmesan, but I do have Grana Padano, which has a similar flavour profile in my opinion. So 1/2 cup of that. And then it says a little bit of salt, just 1/2 teaspoon of salt, similar of pepper. We like a bit of pepper. And then it's got some fresh parsley, which I don't have and I'm not overly worried about. So that's the cheese blend for the top of the keto lasagna. Now, in regards to that, because of what I did with the pasta sheets, I'm wondering what size container to use. So I have this tin here, which is probably going to work quite well, I reckon. It's not very deep, but I think it'll work. So I'm going to put this out of the way. Put my salt and pepper out of the way as well. We've got measuring cups. We got this. All right. So it says to layer the pasta and then the meat. So we've got the pasta here. Can we see? I'm on a weird angle because the camera's up on the mincer because it's just convenient for the moment. So we've sort of got to this point here, but I think it's going to be... So the idea is if we go like that, take it along that way, and then if I slice this in half, that should pretty much fill this tray. Not the neatest thing in the world, but it works. So there's a layer of pasta in the bottom. Now we're going to put some meat sauce. I'm going to use the cheese spreader because it doesn't matter unless you don't want streaks in your meat or cheese, like I said before, which I just don't care. All right, so we're going to be generous with the meat in this one. So I'm going to put a little bit more to cover that pasta up. Well, faux pasta. Generous with the meat there. All right, so then we're going to cut another piece of the pasta for the same thing. And then I'm hoping that with the bits left over, I should be able to get a third one out of it. So we want sort of to here. That. And we'll take the edges off again. Like that. And then just run that down the side there, and I think we're going to call that good. And put meat on top of that one again.
When you're done making this, can I make the lemonade?
Yep. Alright. And then last sheet of pasta is not going to cover it completely, but I can live with it. Could just put cheese straight on top here, but I'm just going to use it. And we that top layer. So now I know that how much I need for something like this and the size of the sheet too. I'm going to put a tiny bit more sauce on top of that bit there, and then I'm just going to top it with the cheese, just to cover that up so it doesn't get crispy or anything. Same on this bit here. And then I'm just going to scoop the cheese on top, which is very thick because of the frozen, so I should have spread that out a little bit better. We're learning together here. This is not going to be pretty, but it's going to be tasty, I hope. So that, with that frozen cheese, I definitely needed to thin that out a little bit, or put it in different blobs. As I said, I don't care that my cheese and meat are streaked together, so that's fine. Or that my fingers are in it, because I'm the one eating it and I know my hands are clean. So people might not like seeing it, but I'm the one who's eating it, so so there we go. Keto one done. Gonna stick that in the oven as well. And now I just have to clean up, and then dinner will be ready in 20 minutes and I won't have to do anything else. All right, everything has been in the oven for 20 or 30 minutes. It's still only 5:10, but I'm happy to be done with my part of the job. So we have lovely creamy kids Pastitsio / cheesy pasta bake, and
This looks really good.
ours, which looks good too. So the 2 pasta bakes, one for dinner tonight, one for dinner tomorrow, or lunch, or they might eat more than one, who knows. And then ours as well. I probably could have sprinkled some extra cheese over the top and got like one of those stretchy cheese type tops to it, but I'm pretty happy with that. So when I slice them up, I'll show you, but other than that, I'm done for the day. Alrighty, so let's have a look at how it's set up. So that's the kids' pasta bake, that sort of Pastitsio like, so it ends up setting in layers, and is a bit like lasagna, even without the needing to worry about the pastry sheets. So I served up the keto one. Camera wasn't recording, of course, because, you know, that would be too easy. So it's come out in sort of a piece, but sort of not, and I'll let you know how it tastes. But that is the end of today. So we've still got about like 10 serves of Bolognese that will go into bags in the freezer as well. Out of that, we got the 2 tray bakes of the kids' Pastitsio / you know, pasta bake lasagna thing, and the keto one, which will be a couple of meals for us too. So I'll come back at the end and let you know how it tasted. But you know, long day, but pretty, you know, good amount of stuff done in it. So I will see you guys on the next one. Right, so the keto lasagna, really good. The pasta, it tasted just like pasta. I'm sure you could fool someone if they didn't know it wasn't actual pasta. It is late, it's 7:30, and I'm out in the poorly lit part of the kitchen, so excuse the lighting, but it was really good. So we have enough of that for another meal, probably tomorrow night. I've got some egg whites from today's cooking in the fridge, so we might use them for chaffles tomorrow and then have the lasagna again for overnight. But in the meantime, I also packed up all the leftover bolognese. So normally I put it all in these gallon Ziploc bags, except that these are quarts, I think. Anyway, the larger Ziploc bags, except that was the last one I could find. So we've got a 2 kilo lot there, and then in the smaller ones we've got 1 kilo, so we can defrost 2 of these for a meal. But it really depends on what you use them for. Like if I'm using this as a topping for baked potatoes for the kids, or even maybe nachos or something like that, then we may only need 1 kilo for a meal. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 kilos, 10, 11 kilos of bolognese meals there. So that is up to 11 meals of bolognese over the next month or whatever, however long we've got left in the grocery run, a little bit longer sometimes. They can eat it once a week if I want to, because they really enjoy it. It's a favoured meal. So I really enjoy having it in the freezer. It just makes simple, but it also can be used for so many things, because it's just that tomato paste, vegetable based meat. It can be used, as I said, for nachos. It can be used on loaded baked potatoes, with pasta, in pasta bakes, or any of those things. So wonderful thing to have in the freezer. So that is my bulk bolognese and a couple of the ways that I use it. So thanks for joining me again, guys, and I will see you on the next video.